Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Denver. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Reed Duke. We're ready for day two action here, Reed, where we've got two undefeated players. There were 5 of them overnight of our 1,500-plus player field. And these are 2 of them. Of course, only one of them will walk away with an unblemished record from here. And we've got what will be one of the matchups that we're going to see. Not quite the white-blue mirror here, Reed. We've got Panharmonicon in white-blue versus the Flash deck that we've seen quite a bit of.
So, yeah, Seth must be pleased not only to be 9-0, obviously, but also with the results of day one, putting, as you mentioned, Black-Green Delirium, Blue-White Flash, and Aetherworks Marvel as the top 3 decks in the day 2 field.
Yeah, you know, they said that those are the 3 decks that they were aiming for when they brought this Panharmonicon deck to the table here. And their main concern was running into a bunch of aggressive decks on day 1 that maybe wouldn't last the day. And getting ran over, because, you know, when you take turn 4 off to play Panharmonicon, it does come at a significant cost. But now they feel like they're really well set up in day 2, especially with good records. Seth obviously being the best at 9-0 here.
It makes a lot of sense to me because blue-white, the color combination, has natural strengths against Aetherworks Marvel in Spell Queller and its other counter spells. And Seth and his teammates, their take on the deck is basically to make it geared more heavily for the late game, more card advantage, more combos. So that should give it an advantage against the slower black-green decks, of course. And I predict an advantage in the pseudo-mirror match here if the game stalls out and stagnates a little bit. Generally, in Magic, it's a traditional strategy. If you want to win a mirror match, you go a little bigger because most of your cards are matching up and bouncing off each other, and then the player who's left with a little extra gas in the tank when the dust settles is the player that's usually going to win.
In the meantime, a decent start from both players here. And we see a nice play from Rob Pisano here. He crews up his copter, attacks with it, enticing Seth Manfield to crew up his own copter, perhaps for a block and a trade. But before blocks happen, but after it becomes a creature, Rob's going to snap it off with Stasis Snare.
So Rob's off to a nice aggressive start here,
right.
But shields are down, and it's turn 4, so bam.
Oh, Slam Harmonicon. That's how you do it, right?
I wonder at this point, too, if Rob, if it's on his radar what Seth is playing, because for the first few turns, it just looks like a regular blue-white deck, but now
that's
cat's
funny.
out of the bag.
Oh, for sure. Now he knows exactly what's going on. And, I mean, how good of a spot is this for Manfield? This is the big question, right? He maneuvered enough to be at 16 life when he played his Panharmonicon. He knows he's taking a hit of at least 3 damage here, but then he gets to untap and, potentially wreak havoc here.
I think it's huge in this matchup that a lot of Seth's heavy hitters cost exactly 5 mana out of Spell Queller range. We saw him pick up the Sky Sovereign console flagship off of Glintnest Crane on turn 3, and that can neither be countered by Spell Queller nor Revolutionary Rebuff. So that's going to make it hard for Rob to put any non-vehicle, non-flash creatures onto the battlefield and just get eaten by the Sky Sovereign.
Ooh, not great news for Rob Pisano here as well. He actually is going to use his mana up to just sacrifice a clue to draw a card. Wow, and misses land drop on top of it. Certainly was a signal that that's what he was digging for, right? And missing it has to just be a crushing blow here.
So this is what Seth's deck was designed for, this position. And
when your opponent misses land drops?
Yeah, and when you
look at this.
Have
please
free
be a Cloud
reign.
Blazer just once.
Oh.
Yes, thank you, Seth. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good morning, everybody. We're off to a great start here. So, of course, the Panharmonicon's going to double trigger that enters the battlefield ability. That's 4 cards, 4 life into the hand of Seth Manfield. Was that game?
Yeah, it was. I think Rob's only hope from that position was to cross his fingers that Seth did not have Cloud Blazer in his hand, and then maybe you can fight through the Sky Sovereign, run him out of gas, and his draw will stagnate a little bit. But having just drawn 4 fresh cards, we know that Seth has both Cloud Blazer and 3-Bit Inspector and Glintnest Crane in his deck. All of these cards will help him draw into more, and things are just going to spiral out of control.
Rob did find land number 4 with his draw step, but as you can see by the hands on the head gesture there, he knows he has a lot of work to do to try to beat this Panharmonicon.
Yeah, what would normally be his best play here, Gideon, it's just useless in the face of a Sky Sovereign that's going to double trigger for 6 damage to planeswalkers and creatures.
He immediately cashed it in for an emblem in this case, Reed, allowing him to get in with the Copter and putting Seth to the decision of if he'd like to take 4 or chump block with a Glint Nest Crane or something. He's just going to take it and go to 13.
Man, is there any better feeling of untapping the turn after you've just drawn 4 fresh cards? The world is your oyster. You can do anything you want.
There is not. Ancestral Vision leaps to mind.
Yeah. End of turn Sphinx's Revelation.
Oh, God.
That's what this double Cloud Blazer is, right? It's Sphinx's Revelation, gain 4, draw 4.
Yeah, and you even get a creature.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do have to have a Panharmonicon. So you did end up dumping 9 mana into that, but hey. All right, and there's the Sky Sovereign that you mentioned, and only 1 target available, so he is going to mow it down. And he'll only get single triggers off of it when he goes to attacks. But still, Sky Sovereign, very powerful just on its own. It's not just a abuse with Panharmonicon.
Yeah, that's a card that's been remarkable in my standard experience. Just how devastating it is on a variety of board states against a variety of opponents. 5 is a fairly key mana cost, as I was getting at earlier in the round. Being able to dodge Spell Queller and, of course, kill Spell Queller if that comes up makes this card just very conveniently templated for standard.
Well, Rob's going to continue the damage train here. Seth doesn't have quite enough to crew up his Sky Sovereign. Seth last turn opting for an attack for 3 rather than leaving back creatures to make the Sky Sovereign available as a blocker.
Yeah, good point. I wonder why he chose to trade damage there.
Curious as well. We haven't seen it, at least you and I haven't seen it yet in the booth this weekend, but there is always that threat. You see the Westvale Abbey down in the land base for Seth Manfield as well, and he's already worked his way up to 3 creatures plus a vehicle, so effectively 4 creatures.
Yeah, you know, we didn't see it in the feature match area, but I walked by on one of my off rounds yesterday. I watched Pascal Maynard playing against Sandy Dog MTG, the famous Mardu Vehicles pilot, and Pascal won with Ormondal.
Oh, okay.
Westvale Abbey.
That's pretty good. Well, here's one for Seth Manfield. This could certainly change the way the game plays out. He's got an Eldrazi Displacer. He's going to use it to crew his Sky Sovereign immediately. 3 mana available for Rob Pisano, who hasn't done anything with it yet. And Seth is going to attack with the Cloud Blazer and the Sky Sovereign, and that's going to let him shoot down one of the Thraben Inspectors. Down it goes.
As if Eldrazi Displacer wasn't powerful enough in its own right. With a Panharmonicon, every 3 mana you spend, you get to trigger your best enter the battlefield ability twice.
All right, well, this gets interesting. There's a Stasis Snare to take out the Eldrazi Displacer. Pisano really has no choice. He'd probably prefer to take down the Sky Sovereign, but it could just get saved. So he kind of is forced here thanks to the pre-combat Displacer. Wow, that's insane, Reed. I actually haven't seen one of these players go off with that yet.
Yeah. I mean, if I don't know what's in Seth's hand here, but it's hard to even imagine a better play than just blinking my Cloud Blazer for 4 extra life and 4 extra cards.
I certainly can't. What are you doing, Seth? Don't do that. I mean, he does have 5 cards in hand. But all right. Yes. Yes. All right. Oh, man. Seth, I love you, buddy. This is great. In the meantime, the Sky Sovereign still does its work, gets in 3, takes down the Thraben Inspector. Look at Seth's hand. I guess we're moving to our discard here. Ugh. This Panharmonicon deck, when it gets going, is disgusting.
It really is.
Interesting to see, too, because the white-blue flash deck tends to be more of an incremental type deck. You know, it doesn't have cards that really just say, oh, I won the game. You know, a huge game-swinging effect. It's more little nibbles here and there. And you can see when Seth is able to set his board up the way he wants, he can very cleanly go over the top of the deck.
Yeah, I believe that, you know, it's just a matter of time before Seth puts the nail in the coffin and wins this game. But what will be most interesting in this match is seeing how sideboarding changes the dynamic. Mm-hmm. Where Rob Pisano has no way to remove Panharmonicon from the battlefield in game 1, he's got 3 Fragmentizes, which is a super efficient answer. He also can tailor his counterspell suite to match up much better against Seth's threats. Right now, no answers to something like Sky Sovereign, and generally the 5-mana spells, there's just not a lot he can do. But after sideboard, that's not the case.
So that was a Glint Nest Crane there, triggering 75 times, letting Seth Manfield just churn through his library looking for artifacts.
Pretty soon, Seth will just know the entire contents of his library from putting everything on the bottom with Glint Nest Crane.
That's funny. We're going to see an Archangel Avacyn from Rob. Yeah, and this is something that Seth will have been aware of. Though Sky Sovereign console flagship kind of cleanly outclasses Archangel Avacyn.
Although remember about the Gideon emblem, it is a 5/5.
Oh, right,
so
of course.
If not for the 15 cards in Seth Manfield's hand, that might have.
And that's the thing, right?
We
We can't be surprised by that. He had a Stasis Snare. Of course, he had a Stasis Snare. He knows that Rob has something there, and Archangel Avacyn's the scariest of the options.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to be game 1. Like you said, it wouldn't take long for Seth Manfield to leverage multiple Cloud Blazer double triggers. And sure enough, that was the case, and he is able to take down game 1 from Rob Pisano. Rob is take a deep breath and dive into that sideboard. Like you said, I'm really curious to see how well players are equipped to attack this Panharmonicon deck. You and I, Reed, actually had a chat about this yesterday because I was, I think the deck's really cool, but I was thinking to myself, there's a concept of like incidental sideboard hate, and Panharmonicon has so many similarities with Aetherworks Marvel.
Yes.
That it just makes me scared that the people that came with the sideboard prepared to destroy an Aetherworks Marvel also like, hey, sure, a different 4-mana artifact, whatever, I'll kill that instead.
Yeah, that's a great point. 4-mana artifacts should not be surprising anyone at this tournament.
Take a look at Tyler Hewley. He's playing against Steve Rubin. These are 2 more of our undefeated players. We have 5. And as you can see, we've got these 2, and then our main match are 4 of the 5, the 4 that are all undefeated playing against each other, which means that our last undefeated player, of course, is playing down.
Steve's surely happy to have been paired against the Black-Green Delirium deck rather than either of the other 2 players we were just watching. And as you can see, Steve's already up a game and doing pretty well in this one as well.
Wow, up a game with a Planeswalker, a creature, and as many lands as your opponent. I like the way that looks for Steve Rubin.
Many of my teammates on the Pantheon are playing a similar deck to Steve Rubin, and they named Tireless Tracker as one of their favorite cards in the 75.
Okay. Any reasoning? I mean, we know it's raw power level, but anything beyond that?
Well, I think it particularly excels in these post-sideboard games when the opponent is gearing their deck to beat the Aetherworks Marvel. It sometimes means they have to trim on their removal or lose some of their fast clock that they might have had in the first game. And Tireless Tracker is easy to just dominate a game anytime the opponent's not prepared for it. Also, when both players have Ishkanah, Graph Widow, the board just clogs up and you sit behind these slow card advantage engines. And the player with the Tireless Tracker is going to win a game like that.
Looks like a pair of Ulamogs in hand for Ruben.
Yeah, so he can't be too happy about that. Not
Yeah.
only are those quite far from being castable, but also no longer in his library to hit with the Marvel.
Ruben's going to jam for 5 here, it looks like. Yeah, the rest of the cards in his hand are Ishkanah, Graph Widow, and he's also got a Vessel of Nascency.
I love this, using Chandra's mana ability
Cool.
to good effect.
You don't see that one as often, but there you go.
No, I think that's one of the subtle strengths of the card. That's, I mean, 2 free mana is an extremely powerful ability, as we've learned in virtually every Magic format across history. So even though that's not the first move you often use with the Planeswalker or the most flashy one, having that option really increases Chandra's stock.
Wow, it really does. Steve Rubin able to have a very productive turn there thanks to that. Without it, it would have looked a lot worse. It would have been a Vessel, maybe crack it.
Yeah.
Here's a Mind Rack Demon now for Tyler. Looks like he is safely at Delirium. Okay, well, our first match is underway. Let's jump back over there. We'll let this one play out. But I got to see how this Panharmonicon deck fares in Game 2 versus Blue White Flash after Rob's had a chance to consult Ye Old Sideboard.
Yes. This should be the game that Rob is most confident in, the sideboarded game where he gets to be on the play.
And this looks like a dream start for him as well. He's got the 2-drop, Selfless Spirit, and now he gets to pass the turn with the dreaded 3 mana up. And Seth is going to lead off with a Reflector Mage, but that will draw a Spell Queller from Rob.
Yeah, so Rob has to be happy with that exchange. Anytime you get to counter a spell that your opponent invested all of his or her mana into, that's great. But I think Seth... I think Seth predicted the Spell Queller there and identified the Reflector Mage as an extremely powerful card to have locked under a Spell Queller.
Oh, interesting.
If he ever frees it up later, it can be a huge turnaround at the drop of a hat in terms of who's ahead on the battlefield.
So Seth is going to use a Fragmentize to take down the Smuggler's Copter that Rob added to his board in addition to a second copy of Selfless Spirit. But in the meantime, the damage is really flowing here, and that was not a particularly productive turn for Seth Manfield. All he did was Fragmentize, pass, and just did nothing with his mana. But he's got a Cloudblazer now, and that's going to get him a little bit of life back and put him a blocker for one of the Selfless Spirits.
Yeah, and now it's Rob's turn to let mana go to waste, having nothing to counter the Cloudblazer, nothing to play at the end of the turn.
All right, so that trade does happen. Seth Manfield back down to 6, facing down the 2 Flyers. He could come back from here.
One possibility in the early turns of the game is that Seth could have had a handful of white cards, but been only choked on having the 1 Prairie Stream, unable to play 2 cards in the same turn.
Right.
Now he finds his second white mana, though, and a lot of possibilities open up for him.
Yeah, he's going to lead with Displacer, which is going to get Spell Quellered, but here we go. Reflector Mage. That's going to return the other Spell Queller, get a Reflector Mage back, return the other Spell Queller, maybe.
Yeah,
yes.
here's the play that Seth has been setting up since turn 3 when he jammed that Reflector Mage.
Disgusting.
And It makes me wonder if maybe Rob should have said, okay, Reflector Mage resolves, end of turn, I'll flash in a Spell Queller. It could be that Reflector Mage is simply less dangerous on the battlefield than it is locked under Spell Queller.
That is interesting. Because look at this turnaround. Now Rob does have double Spell Queller in hand, but Seth knows. You know, he's going to be able to craft his game plan around that. Maybe even forcing Rob to just run them out.
And Seth has established the Displacer Reflector Mage combo,
Yes.
which makes it very difficult for Rob to stick any creature.
Yeah, Seth has 2 activations of Eldrazi Displacer at his disposal here as well, thanks to the 1 copy of Wastes that you see, as well as the Westvale Abbey. And now Rob, yes, is forced to just run out 2 Spell Quellers, and Seth can have his way with them.
Yeah, he sure can.
Does he just do it? Does he just say, I'm just going to return both of those, or?
It depends what's in Seth's hand, but that's certainly a reasonable approach here.
Yeah, I think Seth is asking if he's allowed to cast them, and he is. That flurry happened on Seth's last turn.
Yeah, Reflector Mage reads that the creature cannot be cast until your next turn, so Flash creature matched up reasonably well against Reflector Mage.
Yeah.
One card that should be on both players' radar here is an Archangel Avacyn, potentially on Rob Pisano's side. Seth wants to make sure never to tap his mana at the wrong time because Rob could potentially flash in an Avacyn, sacrifice the Selfless Spirit, and transforming it would devastate Seth's board. But all Seth has to do to counteract that is just leave up 3 mana with the Eldrazi Displacer, and nothing too bad can happen to him.
Yeah, but he doesn't have the luxury of doing that at this point. Like, he has to get rid of 2 of these 3 flyers. He's at 4 life. I mean, he can wait. Oh, look at this. Deep in the tank for Manfield.
Yeah, we've seen this posture from Seth Manfield before.
Uh-huh. This is the Feels Bad Man, or no, not Feels Bad Man. Somebody in chat help me out here. What is that? What is that thing called? Have you ever seen the emote that Ben Schwartz is?
Oh, I'm not sure if I have.
Yeah, you'll see it. Just give it a second. I'll show you in the chat. They'll go nuts. Oh, it's not like this. That's what it is.
Not like this.
Yeah, there it
Not
is.
like this.
I just saw one. There you go. See that? Thank you, chat. Did you know that was Ben SW?
No, I didn't.
That's him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Ben.
Yeah.
So just to clarify what I had been mentioning a second ago with Archangel Avacyn, the one saving grace for Seth is that if Rob is forced to cast Avacyn on his own turn, Seth could bounce it in Seth's upkeep before it transforms. So even though it would be inconvenient and would tie up a lot of Seth's mana, it's not going to be game over right away.
Okay. Interesting. And you can see that this spot has gotten incredibly complex, as I believe that Seth has actually stepped away to ask for a clarification on the rules.
I wonder what he could be asking about. Oh, I know what he could be asking about.
Tell me.
If Rob cast 1 Spell Queller, it resolved, then he cast the other, Seth might be asking if he can displace Rob's existing Spell Queller and force it to counter the other Spell Queller.
Oh, but what it really says is that you can't cast it, right?
Well, this is aside from the Reflector Mage. The Reflector Mage is a separate issue, which Seth could also be asking about. I'm not too sure.
But, yeah, go ahead. I get you now.
Spell Queller is a mandatory trigger.
Right.
It must counter a spell when it enters the battlefield if there's a spell on the stack that can be countered. So Seth could use this to his advantage. One of the subtleties of this situation is the players may not have been 100% clear whether the first Spell Queller had resolved or whether Rob was just casting. Well, I guess either way it's the same thing. One Spell Queller has to resolve before the other.
Yeah.
Very bizarre situation.
This is crazy.
I'm glad we have former world champion Seth Manfield navigating this situation for us, because he'll show us what the best play is.
Well, I'm glad we have you in the booth. So Rashad thinks that there may be a chance that one of them gets exiled. Let's find out. This is going to be really interesting. Seth is definitely on the same line of thinking that you were on, Reed, where he's like, wait a minute. All right, so one of them is going to resolve. That has already happened, in fact. But what about the next one?
Spell Queller is templated in the old way, where if you blink it in response to its ability, the spell can be exiled permanently. So there's a lot of subtlety here, and Seth's going to have to navigate it exactly the way he wants to in order to get the desired effect. And as cool as this is, you made the point a second ago that Seth has to answer 2 of these 2-power flyer creatures, or he's going to be dead on Rob's turn.
It's also just it's just very iffy taking 2. I mean, he still has a lot of work to do here to Seth Manfield.
We don't know exactly what the players are talking about, but it could just be clarifying the timing that the 2 spell quellers were cast. Ooh, and a judge is involved now.
Yeah, I think that they're sorting out exactly what had happened here. Some of our chat is chiming in, though, including Ben Whites, who says you can never exile a spell permanently with Queller and Displacer. So
Correct, because Displacer's effect happens immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So the Spell Queller would just wind up back in play.
Right.
Well, this is what judges are for. If you and I were playing this game on the kitchen table, I would just scrap it. Let's just start a new game. I don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, you want another sandwich? Yeah, thank God for judges.
Yes.
And it was really interesting to see this situation develop because we saw the hands go into the hair, for Seth, because he was like, wait, what happens here? And he was trying to grind it through on his own before he finally said, all right, I need to ask somebody because this is way too complicated. And then the other layer, and like you said, we can't really hear what's going on down there, though, is exactly when all of these things were happening. The way I saw it, I thought, okay, well, he went Spell Queller, that happened. And then he put another Spell Queller on the stack, and as far as I know, that's kind of where we're at this point. But
okay, something's happening. Let's find out what it is. Okay, so Seth looks to be targeting his Reflector Mage. Bouncing Selfless Spirit.
Okay. He's got a Stasis Snare, too. Okay, so at the end of the day, nothing super flashy. He ended up just returning his Selfless Spirit and eating up one of the Spell Quellers. Wasn't able to do anything super tricky there, and Seth still finds himself in a similar position that we were just describing. He's facing down a 2-powered flyer, more or less tapped out, and he's going to fall down to 2 life here.
Yeah, with all the crazy possibilities that could have happened there, Seth elects for a simple way to make sure that he's not going to die. But man, that's a cool situation, and it was a little, honestly, past my processing capabilities. I'll have to sit down and think that one through after the round.
Yeah, that's a tough one in the booth, because if you and I just walked through it step by step, we could figure it out, I'm sure. But the problem is we never know when the action's going to restart, and if we're halfway through our process, it's a little awkward to just stop. So I usually opt for, at the moment, to let our fine judge staff work through it, and then we'll just observe.
Right, especially not knowing what the players are talking to one another about. It can be... We can get sort of lost in our own thoughts.
By the way, this has gone horrifically for Seth Manfield since that sequence. He lost his Eldrazi Displacer and had his Stasis Snare fragmentized, so now he's facing 2 lethal threats in the air that he currently doesn't have any way to deal with.
Yeah, I can think of 2 cards that would at least help him survive next turn. One is Cloud Blazer, the other is Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. The fact that he attacked with the Reflector Mages indicates he probably doesn't have the Sky Sovereign.
All right, well, what do you think about Fragmentize?
Fragmentize works as well. Eldrazi Displacer being back on the battlefield allows him to manage things just like he had last turn, the capability to manage the board with Eldrazi Displacer and Reflector Mage.
Okay, he's going to Reflector Mage away both of the Spell Quellers here.
I like that Seth does it on his own turn. He knows that he has to make the first move or else he's going to be dead to Rob's attack. So he might as well do it while Rob's mana is tapped so that nothing bad can happen in response.
Right. He just doesn't have to worry about it that way. Rob cannot cast his Spell Quellers at this point. This is a close one here. Seth chipping in for 2 damage last turn to knock Rob down to 11. But clearly way behind in any type of damage race scenario. Now Rob's the one with his hand on his head going, okay, Seth, I'm not going to let this one slip away, am I? Selfless Spirit he is allowed to cast.
Yep, that had been Reflector Mage 2 turns ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the weaknesses of this blue-white flash deck is that it doesn't really have a lot of permanent removal spells. After sideboard, sure, they have Stasis Snare, but both players are going to have Fragmentize.
Yeah.
And Stasis Snare is just not as reliable as you need it to be to answer a threat as powerful as Eldrazi Displacer.
Lots of lands here for Manfield. In the meantime, he's going to attack, though Rob does have the ability to play his Spell Queller now, since he's used 2 of his mana. Okay, but it's Archangel Avacyn instead. Is this just going to force the issue for Seth to just go blink, blink?
This would be an extremely dangerous card on a normal board state, but in reality, it's just a 5-mana spell that Seth can answer for 3 mana.
Right, and he's just going to have to do that. And go ahead and get rid of the Spirit as well. So he's going to take 5 damage here. Down to 6 for Rob. And God, is Seth actually doing it here? It feels like he's just straight up ahead, doesn't it?
Rob needs to have something special here.
Unbelievable. Manfield at 2 life.
So Rob could use the technique that I had mentioned a moment ago of Archangel Avacyn and Selfless Spirit. Actually, he can't because of Reflector Mage, but the point is, even if he somehow could get Archangel Avacyn to transform, Seth can just answer it in his own upkeep with Eldrazi Displacer and Reflector Mage.
That's right.
Looks like barring a board sweeper.
Seth Manfield improves to 10-0 with a rather unorthodox win there. No Panharmonicons to be seen. Just doing the Eldrazi Displacer Reflector Mage thing, Reed. Great stuff.
Every game we watch with this deck, we learn another cool interaction, another cool combo that they've built into it.
Man, Seth's tough.
Yep.
He is tough. He looked so dead at a couple of sequences there. But that combo was so powerful, and the fact that he had that Fragmentize to protect it, that was really the key. Because remember, that one turn, I mean, Rob had lethal threats in the air and killed the Eldrazi Displacer, and still Manfield found his way out of it. Really impressive stuff.
Yeah, you don't get to 10-0 by giving up easy.
No, I guess not. All right, that's going to do it for our live coverage here in Round 10. We'll be back, though, after these messages.